Good evening. Welcome to the 2019 General Election Candidates Forum for Kansas City, Kansas and Wyandotte County. I am Merle Bland with Business West. Business West and Kansas City, Kansas Community College are the sponsors of the forum. Let me introduce the panelists who will ask questions of the candidates. They are Mary Rupert, the editor of the Wyandotte Daily Online, Deborah DeCoster, a reporter for the Kansas City Hispanic News, and Herb White, a retired U.S. Postal Service employee and a community volunteer. Randy Royer, our audiovisual director, has asked that everyone here turn off their cell phones. Thank you. Candidates will have 1.5 minutes for opening remarks. Then the panelists will ask questions. Candidates will have 2 minutes to respond. Panelists will have the right to ask follow-up questions. Candidates will have 1 minute for closing remarks. Please understand this is not a debate. Candidates are urged to focus on the issues. The forum is being taped for playback on the college's public access channels. The first set of candidates are running for the Board of Public Utilities, and we'll start in with their introductory remarks with Wayne Bryant. Wayne? Jeff, I'm sorry.
8 years ago, I asked the voters of the 3rd District to take a chance on me. No one knew my name. Most people still don't know my name. I came from a different kind of public service. My father was a local minister, and he served for almost 2 decades as a chaplain in Wyandotte County Jail. What he taught me was most people want to know that their voice is being heard. When I first ran for the 3rd District position, I didn't make a bunch of empty promises. My platform was very simple, and it remains the same today. I just want to make sure that the voices of the people of the 3rd District are heard at the BPU. Whether you call me on the phone, email me, or just stop me in the street, I will listen. Working together, we can find answers to the questions and concerns that we have about our public utility. My other promise is I will treat everyone with the respect that they deserve. My goal is to demonstrate that public service can still exist in a public servant. I am asking you to continue to allowing me to be the voice of the 3rd District at the BPU. To do this, I need your continued support and your vote for Jeff Bryant, 3rd District BPU. Thank you.
Sit right down there. Our next candidate will be Stan.
Good evening. I'm Stan Fraunfelder, and I'm running for the 3rd District. I've been a legislator for the state of Kansas for the 37th District for the last 13 years. I have 1 year left on my term before I end. I've looked at what has been going on with our BPU, and I'm not happy with it. And there are a lot of people out there, some of you that aren't happy with it either. There are questions that need to be asked that haven't been yet, and they need answers for them. That's what's been going on. I feel I'm one of those people, as I proved in Topeka. I like a good fight. I'll get in there and mix it up. I've been accused as part of the Old Boy Network, but I don't even know what that is anymore since Charlie Sugar died 30 years ago. But I will fight for my district. I have fought for my district. I will fight for my county, and I will fight for my state. And I've proven that over the last 13 years. If given the chance, I will do the same thing for the BPU, and hopefully can do something to make sure it's around for the next decade or two coming up. Thank you.
Okay. Our next candidate will be Bob Mylan. Bob?
Thank you and good evening. Hope you can hear me. I'm Bob Mylan. I'm the current board member of the Board of Public Utility. I've served this position for over 20 years. And I've been fortunate enough to have the privilege of serving with 40 different board members during that tenure and 5 different general managers. So that leads me to believe I've had some experience I've learned a lot from a lot of people over a period of years. But here today, we need to talk about the issues. And the issue is the value of the Board of Public Utilities. You know, it's the best kept secret we have in Kansas City, Kansas, because we provide so much for this community. You need to know exactly what we do, how we do it, and let you know that we are upfront with everything. For example, we provide street lights, this community, $5.4 million, 1,900 street lights, 9,000 traffic lights, 600 fire hydrants, to name a few. We provide $45 million a year to UG government, in addition $9.4 million that they don't have to pay for. So we have a lot to be thankful for because we have the record, we have the resources, the best job we can. So thank you, and I have to have some more information at a later time. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Okay. Rose?
Thank you, Mr. Bland. I'd like to thank Business West and Kansas City, Kansas Community College for hosting this candidate forum tonight. I know there's been many of them. However, this one always seems to be very well attended. So I'd like to thank everybody in the audience for coming tonight as well. So I'm Rose Mulvaney Henry, and I'm running for the BPU position at large, position 3. And I am a lifelong Wyandotte Countyan. The only time I have not lived in Wyandotte County is when I went to KU for my undergraduate, Washburn Law School. I have spent the last 26 years of my professional career as an attorney in the utility sector, and so I feel like I'm uniquely qualified for this specific position. My priorities going into this are to try and bring about more accountability, more transparency with the BPU. I'd like to help create a culture of safety. I'd like to look at and evaluate the utility rules that apply to ratepayers and try to improve them where we can. I'd like to make sure that we'd like to negotiate the union contract on time and early if we can. I'd like to make sure we bring some stability to our employees. How do we get there? How I plan to get there is building consensus among the board members. It's something I have a lot of experience doing. I expect to listen to the ratepayers of Wyandotte County, and frankly, I'd like to roll up my sleeves and get to work. A couple of things I don't support. And I want to say this very clearly, I do not support the sale of the BPU, and I do not support the regulation of the BPU by the Kansas Corporation Commission. So I appreciate your vote on November 5th, at large position 3. Thank you.
Our next candidate will be LaRon Thompson. LaRon?
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for having us. Thank you to the Kansas City, Kansas Community College and Business West for hosting this forum today. As stated, my name is LaRon Thompson, and I am a candidate for BPU Board of Directors, District 1. That's First Street all the way to, this is my niece, baby. First Street all the way to 83rd and Leavenworth Road, First Street to 78th and Parallel, First Street to 69th and State Avenue, north of any of that, those mentioned areas. I'm running for several different reasons. I'm running because the time is right. I'm running because District 1 deserves honest representation and consistent representation. I'm running because the time is now. As I stated in previous forums, we've seen the same representation for 28 years. I'm 28 years old, and for all of my life, we've seen the same representation. And I believe that it's time for that to change. It's time for us to invest in our younger generation, to invest in the leaders of today, not tomorrow, because tomorrow's not promised. And so today is the day that we need to invest in our leaders. The other reason I'm running is because the mission of the BPU is to focus on the needs of the customers. And I'll stop right there because I don't believe that the current board or any previous boards have done an adequate job of fulfilling that mission of focusing on the needs of the customers. And when you look throughout the culture of our county and you look at area codes like 66101 and the average income is $25,267 and the poverty rate is 39.4%, those are alarming statistics. And we need to do what we can to ensure that the individuals who live in Wyandotte County have the chance to have a sustainable life in Wyandotte County. And so I ask for your vote on November the 5th, 2019 for BPU Board of Directors, District 1. Thank you so much.
Our next candidate is David Haley. David?
Thank you, Mr. Bland. To the panel, to those of you that are here this evening, and to those that will follow this and watch this as it's retelecast. I am David Haley, and appreciate the fact that we are here at our Kansas City, Kansas Community College, right in the heart of a district I've been privileged to represent for 25 years in the Kansas legislature, here in Wyandotte County to discuss the BPU, the Board of Public Utilities. There are fine candidates that are running here. There are fine candidates that have represented us. But me and mine, you and yours, we know that there are still many questions that are left to be answered, that the BPU has, and that's not being addressed. Time after time for the last 30 or 40 years that I've been involved actively, politically here in Wyandotte County, I'll have someone call me or contact me or even run for office and say they pledge to bring transparency, to bring accountability, to bring a sense of reality to make more livable our Wyandotte County, because our BPU, our jewel, just like our community college is a jewel, so is a municipally owned utility, is not responding to some concerns, legitimate concerns that need to have a frame of reference. I want to put the public back in the Board of Public Utilities. I enjoy serving in the legislature. If you ask around, David Haley has been accountable as a candidate and then elected for several decades in elected service. I want the public to be there because I hear from too many people all the time who don't know how to have a comparison or frame of reference, not only for the rates we pay or the fees that we pay, but to understand the imbalance, if we can, as to why some entities can't go a month and a half before being disconnected, and other entities in our counties can go years until they padlock the field. So we are concerned to have that. And I've jumped out of the cocoon of, or the sanctuary, somebody said, of Topeka, or of being an accountable, elected, responsive public official, to take on and to join these good candidates and to trying to answer the question, how do we get the public through the board back in the Board of Public Utilities?
Thank you. Now we'll turn to the panelists who will ask the questions. And we will start with Mary Rupert, and she will start with Jeff Bryant. Mary?
Thank you very much. If the opportunity came up one day to sell the BPU to a private utility, what would be your response?
That's actually a very simple question to answer. My response would be no. We currently have a municipal utility that we're all invested in. We all gain from. The employees of our utility are required to be Kansas City, Kansas citizens, which means that those jobs that are paid above poverty level are paying taxes in our county and are held by Kansas City, Kansans. I think that's important. We don't need to lose more tax dollars and more good-paying jobs out of our city.
David, your response.
I too have been sent several, the answer is no, but I've been sent several proposals, some which supposedly meet muster, that suggest that we, the ratepayers, would be better off. But I tend to agree with the majority thinking that says owning our own ability to generate and to weld electrical power, to have a municipality that can have a responsible board and responsible administration that somehow turns the benefit to have our own water and our own electric company is a plus for us. And selling that to probably a for-profit entity, I don't see it being of any benefit or more benefit than we should supposedly have for ourselves.
Ron?
Thank you, Mary, for that question. Absolutely not. I would not support the sale of the BPU to a private company. The sale of the BPU to a private company would mean that it would eliminate the voice of the public. And anything that eliminates the voice of the public in Wyandotte County, I'm not in support of. The current structure of the BPU enables us to elect representation from our community to serve as a voice on the current board of directors. And I believe that we should have a voice, and I would not support any attempt to take that voice from the people. Thank you.
Stan?
Thank you. No. two ways of looking at it. I agree. We cannot sell it. We have too much vested in our family members over generations have worked there. It's part of our heritage. It's part of our backbone. It's everything we have. Hardworking people have a lot of jobs there. The problem is, too, you need to look at it. Well, if we sell it, will we get what we want out of it? Remember, it's the third largest revenue source for the city. The third largest revenue source for the city. We couldn't sell it if we wanted to. Thank you.
Bob?
Thank you. I guess the obvious answer is also no. But keep in mind the bill value I mentioned a few minutes ago that need to be qualified. We have 19,000 street lights, 9,000 traffic lights, 6,000 fire hydrants. All those things would not be available from a private company to take with BPU. You own your own. Therefore, we invest in our own community. We have the resources to make sure that we have the services we need in this community at a fair price that stays in Kansas City, Kansas, and not go to the stockholders and shareholders at Wall Street. We must reinvest in our community, and that's what public utility is all about, reinvestment in our own community. Thank you.
Rose?
I can't state it any better than any of the other candidates have, although I am surprised by some of the responses, I guess, just based on past information. But no, unequivocally, I would not be in support of sale of the BPU.
Our next panelist will be Deborah DeCoster, and she will start the questions with Rose.
What action, if any, has happened with the customers receiving extremely high utility bills? Families in Strawberryville and other parts of the city, and some were single moms, were getting between $600 to $700 a month bills for their BPU. And some people couldn't pay that. We had a family in the Strawberryville neighborhood that BPU came out and said it was a water leak, but everything was checked, and this happened over a period of several months. There was no water leak, but their bill was showing they were using enough water to fill an Olympic-sized swimming pool. And they still haven't received answers. Some things have been adjusted, but they didn't get answers on why their bill for 2 years has been that high.
Mr. Coster, thank you very much for the question. I'm currently not on the BPU board, so I can't answer it from that perspective. I can tell you how I have been to public meetings where this particular issue has been discussed, and I believe that the current board, and Jeff and Bob can probably speak to this better because they're on the current board. I know some efforts are being made to try to address the situation. I think something we're lacking at the BPU, all the way around, and I'm not going to blame the board for this, it's just something that's lacking. It's customer education. And you've got people coming to the customer service folks, you've got people coming to the board, you've got people asking questions, and I'm not sure, I believe that the answers they're getting are not necessarily the answers that they're looking for. So I think that's something we've got to work on. We've got to work, if we want to have a municipal utility, and we deserve to have a municipal utility, we better have world-class customer service that goes with it. And with that is customer education. So that's one way I think I would address it.
Bob?
Well, that question, I guess, is probably one of the most asked questions, I guess, about all the utility customers. What can we do to make things better or cheaper? And obviously, people don't want to pay a high utility bill. That's obvious. How can we do, and what can we do to address the issue? Keep in mind what we're faced with. We're faced with a utility bill that encompasses 4 or 5 different items on that utility bill. So with that in mind, the bill encompasses more than we like to pay for, but however, we need to pay for that because the city needs the revenue to make the city function. So therefore, how do we address that issue? Communication. However, we do have a program in place called Utility Assistance Program that we can provide on a case-by-case basis to help you pay your utility bill. All you got to do is come and apply for it. Therefore, we have two programs. One, we have a utility assistance program, which I have here, the information that so many $1 million spent, probably $3,000 to $25,000 here just this year alone. We also have a hardship program on a case-by-case basis based on the qualification by application that we can assist you. So all I can say is that if you come forward, come to the board, we will address that issue for you. We don't have a pocket full of money or a pot full of money, but we do have some money to help those in need. The money's there for you. All you gotta do is come and apply for it. That's the best I can tell you.
Stan?
Thank you. I can't answer the question of what the problem was, why it went over. But as far as rising cost, in the last 8 years, they voted 6 times to raise electric rates and twice to raise water rates. It averages out to about 4.5% a year. And then when you don't offset the pilot, that's 12% more. Every time you raise that, it goes up another 12%. And they didn't do anything to offset that. It shouldn't go to the city, shouldn't get a bump, but we need to, if it needed it, there it is. But now we've got 4.5% a year for the last 8 years. The rates have gone up. And also, keeping Nerman online might help. It operates 65% of the year. I mean, we've got a state-of-the-art factory there that produces electricity, but it only runs 65% of the time. So there's some things need to look at. We can do there. As far as how the meter got off and that, I have no clue. But I can tell you the rising costs, how they got there. Thank you.
LaRon?
Thank you again for that question. You hear stories like that throughout our county many times. I'll preface my answer by saying this. I spoke to about 40 people over the past week who have all since moved out of Wyandotte County. And I asked them why they moved out of Wyandotte County. And the consensus was very common. It was BPU. The rising cost of BPU has driven many good Wyandotte County residents out of our county. And if we fail to retain these residents, the burden of that, what was left, lies on those who remain. And so it's quite difficult for those of us who decide to stay here in Wyandotte County to bear that burden once people leave because of the rising costs. You know, it's sad when you go throughout our county and you see individuals downsizing or combining homes just so they can afford utility bills like you mentioned in your question. $600 to $700 a month is absolutely ridiculous. And as Stan mentioned before, over the past 8 years, 6 times to raise our electricity bill and 2 times to raise our water bill. Something must be done about that. And you'll hear others say, well, we invited the community to give their input. But I rarely hear about any of those things. And that's why one of the reasons I'm running is for transparency. There needs to be more transparency that comes out of the BPU. The BPU meetings need to be live streamed on YouTube or Facebook so that we can go back and pay attention to what's going on at the BPU. After all, they do tell us it's a public utility, one that which we have a share in, that we own. And for us not to be able to get that information readily, it's a problem and it needs to be addressed. Thank you.
David?
I want to hit the gist of your question, if I can, Mr. Coster. As has been stated, the reason certainly that I'm running, and I think several other people are, is every year, every cycle, we hear of horror stories in this county for this jewel of our utility, such as you've listed. I don't want to recount some of them right now because time is limited, but I'll be happy to say that many of our neighbors, many of the concerns that they have, if compared in an apples-to-apples comparison, which is what I'm pushing for, a comparison with what you describe and what others have, if we lived somewhere else, if we lived in some other jurisdiction, a comparison with the Kansas Corporation Commission, and I ask anyone to Google, pull up their website. And that's accessible to anyone. It doesn't cost us anything to see if in fact what you described were to occur in some other part of our state, what in fact would be a remedy. These opinions are online. It doesn't cost anything. So if I'm elected, I would ask my fellow board members to look at these issues, not to ask someone to come down to 1 of 2 meetings a month after work to address the issue where there's an inequity, but to see what kind of standards there are that are set for our state, whether it's a security deposit that's too high or whether it's additional fees like our pilot or our trash fees that are added on, if it's a disconnect for a certain amount of money when after a certain amount of time, whatever those policies are, how would they fare elsewhere and in our state? And that's what I pledge to do, is to have us compare ourselves with others to see if we're getting a fair deal or if we're getting a utility that's out of hand.
Okay. Jeff?
Well, without knowing the details on this specific instance, I really can't speak on it. I can tell you that I approach these all pretty much the same way. I've had people from my district reach out to me with issues like that. As board members, since we are not employees of the utility, we have no access to customers' records, customers' accounts, which is the way it should be. What I will do is I will listen to what the person is asking, what their concern, what their questions are. I'll make note of what it is. I'll make sure and relay that to the appropriate staff at the BPU, and then I always respond to the customer with an answer. It may be working with them to find out whether they need an energy audit because they're having issues at their home that they don't know, sending out a service person to check, like you said, a water leak or some other issue. It may be that they didn't realize that they had left a tap on and they had ran too much water, and then it may be a case of working with customer service to try to get them to do a payment plan so that they don't have to come up with all that money at one time and they can spread it out in a more reasonable fashion. Those are what a representative should do. We can't solve every problem, but our job is to get answers to the questions.
Okay. Our next panelist will be Herb White, and he will start with asking questions of Jeff Bryant. Herb?
Yes. What are concerned about the effects of global warming? What are concerned about the effects of global warming and the use of coal as the main source of energy for fueling the boilers at BPU and the other energy companies? What could the BPU do to phase out this use of coal as a primary source of energy for fueling its boilers?
Thank you for
Jeff?
that question. So actually, the BPU has been very proactive in this. The state of Kansas for non-municipal utilities has a requirement of 20 by 20. So by the year 2020, 20% of their power must come from renewables. The BPU doesn't fall under that because we're a municipal utility, but we have voluntarily, through direction from the board, have been striving to be above that. So actually, we're over 45% now, and what used to be a generation of about 65% coal in the past is now down to around 35%. Our Nearman plant is now the only plant left that runs coal. The Quindaro plants were transferred to gas a couple years ago, and actually they, because of the price to run them, because they're so inefficient because of age, we had to wait until we brought in enough renewables to offset that capacity, because by law we have to have a certain amount of capacity available. But once we got to that point, we're able to determine that we're going to shut down the Quindaro units, shutter those, and no longer run those. So my goal would be that in the next 4 years, I would like to see an additional 10% more renewables added to our portfolio. I was very pleased with the BPU, with the staff on our last purchase of 200 megawatts of wind. Actually, we were able to purchase it for less than it costs us to run the Nearman plant to produce electricity. So we are seeing that renewables are becoming more affordable. The one big thing that's left is storage, but I think that'll come too.
David?
I am pleased that I was a part of the 20 by 20 in the state legislature to have us adopt standards that Kansas and all Kansas utilities would have, and that I'm further pleased that this current BPU has met twice that, as we've just heard, of about 40+% towards renewable. My concern is twofold. And on the board, certainly, we are not existing in the vacuum or in the silo that is Kansas City, Kansas. There are those around us who may offset our efforts to reduce our carbon footprint. So we have various organizations, the Mid-America Regional Council, LISC, and others that I would want to, as a board member here, say to surrounding utilities, KCP&L, Atmos, the other utilities that are contributing in the Kansas City metropolitan area to what that footprint is, to join the BPU in increasing their output but reducing where they rely so much on fossil fuel. I am pleased with where we are, what the benchmark is that has been met, and would certainly be open-minded, as I would hope everyone on this board and that is listening would be, to new innovations as to how we could further rely more on renewable and less on fossil fuels.
Ron?
Thank you for that question. I always say that if you can talk about what's not working, you should be able to talk about what is working. And the BPU has done an outstanding job of making strides to address that global warming issue. As mentioned earlier, Jeff stated that it's over 45% renewable energies, probably close to around 48, 49% from what I understand to be true. And so we talk about all the time what the BPU is not doing. And so in light of what they are doing well, I believe that is one of the areas that they have done well to address the concerns of global warming. Thank you.
Stan?
I think we had a good start at addressing global warming with the 49% wind energy that we've purchased for the next 20 years. We've got contracts for that. What I don't understand is, well, we did bond. We pulled a bond out 4 years ago to create a better quality, air quality problem we were having with Nearman, to do something about that, putting a stack on there to stop that. So we did something with that, but with also at the same time, we took millions of dollars to convert Quindaro to gas, when all we had to do was go on the Southwest Power Pool line where they have hydro, wind, nuclear. It's all cheaper than gas or coal, and we could have bought it on there instead of spending that money on Quindaro possibly. Now, I wasn't there, but the numbers I see, that was very costly to the taxpayers. Secondly, the bond that we're paying for now is $50 million a year. If I read the budget right, it goes up to $63 million in 2022. Where are we going to get that money? So there's some things that need to be addressed on that. But we have done our job as far as the 49%. We are working towards that. What we did with the Nearman plant is not near as EPA, it's more EPA efficient now with the stack we put on there to clean it. And that's where we're at. Thank you.
Bob?
You know, it's amazing how that we can be so far away from one another, and yet still we don't understand one another. First of all, EPA is really the cause of us to be in debt because we were being sued by the Soterra Club if we don't reduce the emission in the air. Therefore, if you recall, when you used to drive across the bridge called Innocent Viaduct years ago, you could smell Folger's coffee. Or you could go down Levitt Street, you could smell barbecue from Gates Barbecue. Those things would change because of the climate, because of the emission in the air. Therefore, we had to convert and stop all that being in the air. We had to spend millions of dollars based on what the EPA said we must do, and therefore we had to do it. On top of that, the new administration came in and said, don't worry about that, Rule 11, you don't have to do that anymore. So you can see, folks, when you're outside looking in, you don't know the real issues. The real issue is that some things you can't help and you don't control. But be careful. Understand what you're talking about, because there are other issues that we have no control over that say you must do this. If you recall, the Secretariat Club are the ones that sued BPU and said you must comply or you'll be sued on a daily basis. What do? Comply. Or the ratepayers and our taxpayers will have to pay the difference of the lawsuit. We are obligated to abide by the law at that particular time, and we did so. So what do we have? We got in debt because it's something that we had no control over, that the new administration changed the game plan. I can't change that at all. Thank you.
Rose?
Thank you for the question, Mr. White. I think everyone here has addressed the question. The one thing I think that clearly I'm in support of trying to further utilization of green resources. One of the things that I think we have to be concerned about, and LaRon's touched on that, is, we have about 25%, a little less than 25% of our community that lives at or below the poverty level. And, when we first do these things, over time, is this going to cost less? Yes, over time it will. But to invest in this, it's not the cheapest thing to do on the front end every time. And, we've heard folks in other forums talk about, the cost of solar panels and things like that, some Wyandotte Countyans can't afford. And so, I think there's some things we can look at, but we have to be mindful of what that cost is. We far exceed the 20 by 20 now. Obviously, we're setting a standard for, the Evergys of the world. And so, here in the state, we're doing a great job. And I think, we ought to give credit where credit's due.
Our next question will be from Mary Rupert, and we will start with Rose Henry. Mary?
Thank you. Should the T-Bones utility bill be written off as a cost of providing attractions to the community, helping the tourism industry, or should the BPU try to collect the overdue bill from the T-Bones former owners?
Thank you for the question, Mary. It's hard. I'm a lawyer, right? It's a tough question, but and I'm not sure the BPU is actually going to be in control of the answer, because I think that the unified government will actually be in control of the answer, because I'll think they'll be in control of the deal, and people are going to sit there and blame the BPU if that money's not collected, but I'm not sure the answer is going to lie with the BPU. So yes, I think it should be collected. No, I do not think it should be written off.
Bob?
Well, the answer is I love to get the money back in the morning. If you read the email this morning, you will find out that it's been sold to somebody else. I haven't got a chance to digest it all. But one of the conditions is kind of a legal matter that the UG government insists that they would repay the $347,000 they owe BPU. Therefore, they had an agreement that they would collect the money, and then they would take that money and refer that back over to BPU. I ain't seen a dime yet. UG had the position to collect the money from T-Bones, including the BPU debt for the utility service, and that money should be returned to BPU. Today, I haven't seen a dime. Have you, Jeff? I don't think so. But my point is, yes, we want the money back. Now, I can't get to the legal ramifications because I don't know all the details, but my point is, we do want the money back. Hopefully, we'll have to sue, or the UG will sue in our behalf. We don't have no authority on our own. We must go to the UG to file the suit in behalf of BPU. That's the way this system works. Thank you.
Stan?
Thank you. I'd fight to get it back. They owe some money. We need to get the money back. They used the service. If that was one of us out there and we were behind $3.50, they'd be shutting our electricity off. We need to get it back. And I don't care if we have to sue them or what we have to do. First of all, I don't think we should have ever gotten that position that far out. That was wrong there. I don't know what we could have done as board members. I'm not on the board. I don't know what they could have done to do anything different. But it should have never got that far to begin with. Okay, thank you.
LaRon?
I'll just repeat this number one more time and let it sink in for you. $347,000. $347,000 is what the T-Bones bill was at the time of their eviction. Mary, thank you for that question, and also thank you for your coverage of this issue in our community. I think that it's unfair. It's unfair, not just for individuals in the community, but for small businesses in the community that struggle to stay afloat simply because they cannot afford their utility bill to stay in business. It's unfair. This is what I refer to when I speak of transparency. No one knew this was an issue until it became an issue big enough to the BPU. I'm glad you knew. I'm glad you knew. Some of us knew, but for the common public, it was not made readily available for us. But if it were us, as Stan said, and we were $3.47 short, a minuscule percentage of $347,000, we would have been terminated. Our services would have been terminated. It's unfair. Policies like this need to be addressed, not just with the board of directors at BPU, because it's not just a BPU issue. It's a unified government issue also. And as a representative on the BPU Board of Directors, you have my word that I will work with the unified government commissioners to ensure that something like that never happens again.
David?
I think we all feel pretty passionately about this. It's been in the news quite a bit. And yes, to answer your question, we will push to collect it. No, it will not be written off. And my question is, I guess, broader than one entity. I wonder, where are the other places where we, as through our board and through this utility currently, are allowing these transgressions, where there are others? You know, there's a hard and fast rule if you are Joe and Jane average ratepayer. If you're late for a couple of weeks, no matter what the amount is, you'll be disconnected. Doesn't matter how long you've had service, doesn't matter what your conditions might be, period. You're disconnected, and there's a reconnect charge. So my question, or many questions that several of the people I've talked to, is not just about one entity or a sports entity, but how many other times are we seeing forbearance by this hard and fast policy that disaffects those of us who are the average or low end, or don't have some special interest connection through the board? Or how many times is that happening? How many times is that occurring? Whatever this dollar figure is, 300,000 plus, I imagine that if we get the transparency that I want to bring to the board, a top to bottom review of where there are other sweetheart deals, if you will, I think that we'll be able to find that $300,000+ that the T-Bones is absorbing may be a drop in the bucket. And we have to reallocate those dollars to ensure that rank and file, everyday Wyandotte Countyans and small businesses are able to get the same sort of consideration.
Jeff?
This is actually a issue that's very near and dear to my heart. During the previous mayor administration, we had multiple meetings with the mayor and staff when I sat as the board vice president, board president, and asked to be paid or to shut off the T-Bones. And we were told by the unified government that we were not allowed to do that because that was an asset that was drawing in tax dollars to our city, and therefore it's offsetting that loss. When the UG decided to do a deal with the T-Bones and purchase a stadium, they came to us and said, you can be part of the deal and you can be bonded out on this, but it's going to be pennies on the dollar of what they owe you. The board, and specifically I, said, why would we take less than full amount when they've already used the electricity and the water? That's like going to get groceries and then deciding you don't want to pay the whole amount because you didn't enjoy them as much. Then, when it came before the commission on one of their UG commission night meetings, and they came up on whether or not they were going to do the deal with the T-Bones, I was the only Wyandotte Countyan that stood up and said no. There was a long line of Johnson Countyans who came in to talk about how great the T-bones are and how much it was a benefit to our city. And then when they asked for people that were against the deal, I was the only one, and I told them, and I didn't stand up as a board member. I stood up as a resident of our city to tell them that this was not a good deal for the residents of our city. What you're asking all of us to do is pay for the entertainment value for people outside of our county.
Our next question will be from Deborah, and we'll start with Jeff.
If elected to the BPU board, how do you see the future of BPU board and what you will work to do? Do you see BPU producing their own energy, maybe doing more with the solar panel fields, better customer service? What do you think you can do for the future of the company?
Thank you. So before I ran for the office, I actually attended board meetings for a year. And I wanted to understand what was going on at the BPU before I decided to run. I don't believe in jumping in with 2 feet into something you don't understand. By the time that I decided to run, there were 3 areas of the BPU that I saw that I felt myself could have the biggest impact on. My day job, I'm a cost analyst, so money is a big issue for me. The days cash on hand were very low. That is not good for any company, because what that means is everything you want to do to fix something, you have to borrow money. You don't get good interest rates because you don't have cash, and you can't go out and pay cash for projects, for small projects. So now you're borrowing money for things you don't need to. All right, it's like using a credit card to buy your groceries because you can't afford to buy your groceries. That was the first thing. And it took a while, but we went from around 20 days cash on hand to now we're about 75 days cash on hand. So that means that our bond rates are much lower, but bigger than that means that we don't have to borrow money every time we do something. The second thing, improve our infrastructure. That's an ongoing thing, fixing our old water mains and our lines, 68, 80 years old, east of I-635. We're working on that. The last thing, customer service. Of late, we're getting more and more people coming in with concerns about the customer service at the BPU. In my next term, that's going to be my main focus, is working on what other projects, programs can we put in place to benefit the residents of our city, and how can we end up with world-class customer service that makes the people of Wyandotte County raving fans of our public utility.
David?
Honestly, I believe, and that is a good question, you know, cycle after cycle, we hear candidates run. We know that there are problems with the BPU. Everyone knows there are problems with the BPU, except maybe a chosen few. The majority of Wyandotte Countyans know. And every time we come back to this table, every time we have these forums, every time we hear these candidates, they say the same thing. Vote for me, elect me, and we will change some things at the BPU, and it never happens. Whatever happens, they go down there, they drink the Kool-Aid, and suddenly the public is not represented anymore. So I feel, having run time and again, having been elected, having served the public trust, when I tell you that I intend to be elected and to go and represent the public, all of these issues that we're discussing now will not be forgotten after I get there. That's why I feel very strongly about this campaign, that putting the public involved. I've tried my best to be a public servant, haven't been a perfect servant, but I have tried to serve the public well and get elected and reelected with larger margins, because if I do something, if I say I'll do something when I get elected, I'll do. There's special interests that are very concerned that, in fact, David Haley could win this race. I assure you that the transparency, the accountability, ensuring that we can compare how we are as an entity in this region, not only by way of cost, but by way of policies, will be addressed in this term if David Haley is on the Board of Public Utilities. I will not forget.
Ron?
Thank you again for the question. The motto for the BPU currently is the power of community. I think that should be changed to a community in power. It's time for the community to have a voice, a well-represented voice on the board of directors. And where do I see that the BPU going in the next few years? If I'm elected, I vow and commit to bringing more transparency to the community on behalf of the BPU. It's vitally important. It's vitally important, especially when we are paying astronomical rates to some which would say we're number one in the state, but that is not true at all when you look at the facts. And even if you go talk to the current manager of BPU, he will state that we're not number one. It's just not true. We can do better. We can be better for the people. The motto is to focus on the needs of the people. We fail to do that. And if I'm elected, you have my word that I will do that. And to continue on the path that we're on with renewable energies. I think it's vitally important, especially if it's going to increase the savings of individuals, businesses, corporations in our community, because we do want people to come to our county and love it, not once they get here begin to hate it because of the high BPU bills. And so that would be my vow to you if I'm elected. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, this is a long answer, but I have a short time period to do it. First of all, my opponent again stated our cash on hand came up. How did we do that? Let me reiterate. We raised the rates 6 times on electric, twice on water in 8 years, averaging 4.5 without doing anything to pilot. So not only did I raise that, we raised everything across the board. The pilot, the trash and everything went across the board. Again, I stated earlier, you want BPU to be around and be part of our community again forever, we got to get Nearman up running at 100%. Part of the problem we had at Nearman was oversight. Who is running it? The plant manager. 3 years ago, they had a coal chute fire. Now, there's safety regulations in there for that. Now, granted, it shouldn't have happened, but it did. Accidents happen. Less than a year later, the same chute caught on fire again. Now, whose responsibility is that? Well, it's the plant manager. And who handles the plant manager? The general manager. And then who handles the general manager? We do, the board members. Something needs to be done there to make sure we have the oversight, and so this plant is running since they closed down Quindaro. It's the only thing we got left. It's a goose that lays the golden egg. And if you want that goose to lay golden eggs, we need to quit thinking now, and we just need to think 5 years in advance what's going on. 5 years in advance. As a business owner, I have to set a budget for 3 to 5 years in advance. If I'm setting them from year to year, I'm behind. You need to start looking ahead for this. So we need to start thinking about what are we going to do 3 to 5 years from now, not now. When you start looking ahead, quit raising the rates every time our cash flow gets long. Find a way to save Nearman, get it up and running full speed, and reduce our rates and reduce that pilot program so it's not such a burden on our ratepayers out there. Thank you.
Bob?
Without a lot of places I can start, and I think we don't have enough time to do that. First of all, let me clear a few things up, maybe not in this order. As far as the pilot's concerned, BPU board members and nobody here has the authority except the UG government. They have the authority based on charter ordinance to raise the pilot from 5% to 50% with nobody's vote but their own. We have nothing to do with that. Our current rate now is 11.9%. At one time, it was 13.9. We had a meeting about 6 years ago that they agreed to reduce it down to at least 9%. Standard & Poor's, Moody's, and the bonding companies have recommended continuously that the pilot should be no more than 7.9%. We have no control of that. That's what the bonding people say. So where are we today? I agree that the pilot program is a well-needed revenue for the UG government. Keep in mind, 35% of our utility bill goes directly to UG government in addition to the 11.9% for the pilot program. So that's one issue. The second issue is about raising rates. BPU board members has nothing to do with raising the rates. There's a system called cost of service, which takes and combines all of the story you hear about the medium income, this and that, and we're the lowest in the 105 of counties in the state of Kansas and so forth. However, after the rate study is conducted, they have a hearing. The public is invited. No board member is part of the rate hearing, the study, information, or not even supposed to be present. After the rate hearing is conducted, it includes three persons or three entities: industry, commercial, and residential. Those entities determine how much the rate should be. Here again, the board members has nothing to do with that at all. But at the end of that, in conclusion, they come before the board, the administrative law judge, and says, "Good afternoon, Mr. President of the board. We recommended 5% across the board for utility rate increase." At that point, they say, "Board, what's your pleasure?" We say yes or no. That's it. We had nothing to do one way or the other. Now, let me tell you the key about that. If the board say, "Well, we don't like the 5%, we think it should be 7%, the disciplinarian can come down and say, "Board members, you're out of order. We're going back to 5. So we have no choice but to do one thing: agree or disagree. That's a system. Once again, the board members have nothing to do with the rate. They're going back to the rate changes like it's every weekend. That's ridiculous. Keep in mind, folks, tell the truth, get the resources. Let's go back to transparency. Let me make this statement here. As a public government entity, the boards are open to review. Moreover, the board in this state here also open to the public and making sure that we try to be competitive. We are currently using local media to share information with the public, to work on sessions with the regular sessions, using our reports and with the board meeting to make sure that we have input, that they can get answers. We are trying desperately to make sure that we can be more transparent. There are a lot of things that can be done. I'm telling you the truth, that you need to have the public input to understand that we are limited because there are some things we can change, something we have to agree to. As far as the rate here is concerned, keep in mind that we are not here to try to raise the rates. We're trying to make sure the rates are stable. Now, all the charts I see around the country states very clearly we are compatible with all of the utility industries, local, UP, KCP&L, etc. Our rates are compatible to them. Now, if I'm wrong, then somebody don't have the right information. But here again, our rates are compatible. And all you got to do is check the record out for yourself and go online and find out. Thank you.
Rose?
Thank you. So the question was, is what do I see, how do I see myself impacting the company in the future? And it's a great question. And folks have given some really good answers today. You know, one of the things we get stuck on is the pilot fee and what to do about it. And it's very easy for us to sit there and say, you know what, this isn't a BPU problem, this is a unified government problem, this is a commission problem. And I hear that, but the unified government is in a position where they're relying on almost $40 million from this particular fee. It is not easy to overnight reduce that fee and somehow reduce the reliance on the $40 million. So rather than point the finger at the unified government, I'd like to actually work with the commissioners in a really productive manner and try to help them find some replacement revenue for that particular thing. I'd like to see me do that. Another thing I'd like to see, in addition to improving infrastructure and improving customer service, is I'd like to see, we've all talked today about the employees for the Board of Public Utilities are required to live in Kansas City, Kansas. And so they reinvest back into our community through the taxes and everything else. I'd like to see us rely less on contractors, and I'd like to see us get some labor force back into the BPU that's much needed today. If you talk to employees, they're going to tell you that. I've talked to many of them. You've got a bunch of stressed out employees right now that are concerned about their future. And something I would like to offer them is some hope that we're going to get them some stability. Like Stan said, you can't think 1 year in advance. You've got to think into the future. And you've got to make sure that this public utility is sitting here for their kids and their kids' kids. Thank you.
Our next question will be from Herb White, and we'll start the questions with Rose.
What do you think that BPU's role should be in promoting economic development in our area here?
Well, I think the BPU is, great question, Mr. White, thank you. The BPU is an agency of the unified government, and I think any government to work effectively should work collaboratively. And I think to the extent that economic development opportunities are being looked at, I would like to think that the BPU would have a role in a deal that's being made with a potential occupant of the city, a potential big business, whatever it is, so we don't wind up in a situation where we've got somebody coming in, not paying their electric bill and not paying their water bill, and we're all sitting here going, well, wait a minute, we got to pay ours. Why doesn't this particular community attraction not have to pay it? So I'd hope it would be a collaborative process, and I'd hope that the unified government, and I'm sure they would, welcome our input into that process.
Bob?
BPU has always had a economic development process on the agenda in our budget every year. Currently this year, our budget is $750,000 economic development. Let me give you a little history about economic development. In 1991, when I was on this board, subdivision in Kansas City, Kansas, around about 7 or 8 subdivisions. Today, there's around 30. The reason for that is because of the input and incentive that the BPU gave to the Builders Association to make sure that they would go all electric and make sure they get a discount of $1,500 or more if you go all electric and build 12 homes or more. So we've been the icon and the upfront person that ensure that economic development rooftops would come to Kansas City, Kansas. We have been the forerunner in that position for a number of years, and we still remain that same position today. Thank you.
Stan?
Thank you, Burl. I think BPU is a big part of economic development. When you're talking about industry, companies, households, what do they need? They need water, and they need electricity. It's a big part of it. I believe the communication between the unified government and BPU should be ongoing, and understand that we need to be fair about it too. I understand economic development is necessary to a community or it becomes stale. But then again, when you have businesses out there that have been part of your community for 20, 25 years, paying taxes, paying the utility rates, and they're giving a break to someone to come in and compete against them, sometimes it's hard to swallow. I don't know what you do. I don't have the answer right now to think about that. I'd have to think about, if elected this position, what I would do. But we must be fair to those who have been here and helped us grow to begin with. I think it's a collaboration between unified government and us to come down and make sure we sharpen our pencils and get an erasers, make sure they're ready, to make sure we get the best price when we're giving something away, that we get the best a buck for a buck.
Ron?
I think Stan is looking at my notes on my paper.
I'm good at that.
But I think BPU should be engaged in the economic development process. Equally as such, they should be engaged in community development, meaning that we should support those businesses, as Stan mentioned, that have been here, staples of the community for well over 20 years. I can think of one that's in my district, Wilson's Pizza. We all know Wilson's Pizza. Mr. Wilson has been a staple in our community. I remember going to Quindale Elementary School, and during the spring semester, we would do a drug walk from Quindale Elementary School down to Wilson's Pizza, and at the end of the walk, he would have a juice in a cooler waiting for us at the end of the walk. I think it is important to build what we have and not just simply invest in something that's new. We saw that with Backyard Barbecue, I think at the Legends, and how that worked. Backfire Barbecue, I think is what it was called, and how that worked and backfired. Let's invest with what's been in our community. Places like Christie's over in Turner, things like that. Let's invest. Community development is what's important and necessary. And we have a budget from one of the current board members that's approximately stated $750,000. Do you know what current business owners would do or could do with that, with a little piece, 10% of that budget, and how much it would advance their business? We need to do what we can to be economic developers, but also community developers. Thank you.
David?
Well, it's amazing that we're all on the same page with this, it appears. I actually visited with Mr. Wilson at Wilson's Pizza too. And we were talking about economic development. And so there's a little irony there. No, I have not conferred with LaRon on this. But I said, what would 1 month after the many years you've been in business, just if 1 month you got a rebate from the utility company, what would it mean to drive your economy or to encourage you? And I also had this discussion over at Fritz's, small restaurants. And there's consensus there. There should be consensus. There should be a policy put in place by all of us sitting here, 3 of whom will sit on the board, that we will look at giving a 1 month break for those who have been in small businesses for a certain amount of time. Why couldn't we? If we can write off 300 or try to write off 300,000 plus thousand, why can't this board, 3 of whom now will be there, why can't we put that in place so that the public can hold our feet to the fire, that was a commitment, a pledge that was made while we were running? That is something I would pledge to do, is to look at those businesses that have been in place. We have to do the fiscal, find out what the cost would be for those who have been in business, often struggling for a certain amount of time, to give that 1 month rebate, to say thank you, as we've said thank you to the new friends. We try to keep our old friends as well. And that is certainly something that I would hope that this policy would be. If no one else will do it, I'll introduce that when I'm elected, and we'll hold transparency to the rest of the board to ask the simple question as to why can't we?
Jeff?
Economic development is a role that the BPU plays. A lot of times, when I sat on the Economic Development Committee, when it would come up, a new project, my belief is the best way to show economic development to a new business or a new entity that wants to move into Wyandotte County and bring new jobs is a reduction of fees, not a reduction of rates. The whole idea is to get them in, to find a way to lower their initial costs, but then the idea is that they are a rate-paying entity in our city, and they're helping pay, because if you reduce their rates, you're not just removing rates, you're removing the amount that they're paying into the pilot, which is the rest of us. And as far as Senator Haley's idea, I think it's a good idea. Unfortunately, we have a lot of good ideas that fall to the wayside. As the pilot, a prime example, when we had our previous mayor and he was doing his State of the Union kind of walk through the county, and they were talking about the sales tax that we would be getting when the STAR bonds were paid off. And they wanted to know what to do with those $12 million. I facilitated all those meetings, so I didn't get to participate. He asked me afterwards what I would do if I got to choose where the $12 million went. I told him, $10 million of the pilot is paid by the residents of our city. What if we took $10 million of that STAR bond money and eliminated the pilot from residents' bills? You'd still have $2 million left over to put in other places in our city. Things like that. We need to think outside of the box. We can solve our own problems. We just have to think of new ways to answer the questions.
We will now move to closing remarks. We will start with Jeff. You have 1 minute.
I want to thank the voters of the 3rd District for having faith in me to carry their message to our public utility. We've made progress, but there's still a long way to go. but I believe I'm the best candidate to get the job completed. I will continue to fight for the changes that will make our utility better for all of the citizens of our city. Most importantly, I will listen to the voices of the people and make sure the BPU staff hears them as well. To do this, I need your continued support and your vote for Jeff Bryant, BPU 3rd District, November 5th. Thank you.
David?
Thank you again for this unique forum and the opportunity for it to be reviewed and seen by not only those that have taken the time to be here this evening, but those that will watch it telecast. So David Haley wants to put the public back in the Board of Public Utilities. It is more than just a catchphrase, and it's more than just something that I'll say here and forget tomorrow if elected. I've been very fortunate, very blessed to have been elected and re-elected with a growing number of trust and larger constituency. During the course of this primary, we had 6 candidates, and I was very fortunate to place over a third of the vote, though I was outspent significantly. Second place, who's here tonight too, I got 15%. The only way that I ran, the only way that I've won is because people do know that David Haley will fight for you. I got into this race only because time and time again, our neighbors, our fellow citizens here in Wyandotte County are saying we simply do not get answers to the questions about policies at our beloved electric and water company, our Board of Public Utilities. There's no reason that the BPU should be a bad word among our constituency. It is a jewel. It needs to be polished. There needs to be review. But most importantly, we need to have someone who's committed, not just here as a candidate, but once elected, to doing what we need to have done. I appreciate this. There's a lot of energy between now and November the 5th. Let's take that energy, please, to ensure that we have a better, brighter future and a more responsive Board of Public Utilities that includes the public. Thank you.
Ron?
Thank you so much again for having us here today. You've witnessed 6 amazing individuals who have taken the opportunity to represent this community. But as a first-time candidate running against a 28-year incumbent who's 28 years old, this is pretty scary. It's a step of faith, one by which I believe I've been called to take. And it's important, it is important that on November the 5th, we get to the polls. Not just yourself, but take 5 of your friends. Pick up the phone every day. Tell them you're coming with me to the polls on November the 5th. Because indeed, our county does need some change. We need some new representation. We need some new, fresh voices to represent us on all the various boards of our community. If elected, you will have my word that I will represent Wyandotte County as a whole. It is important. Everyone, from our young people to our senior citizens, need representation. And that is why I'm running, because we need honest representation on the BPU Board of Directors. So please vote Thompson for BPU on November the 5th. Thank you so much.
Stan?
Thank you, Merrill. Well, we've had a lively debate here. Got a lot of information to absorb. You guys do. I still feel that my opponent's had 8 years, and I haven't seen much of a change. I believe that in my 13 years in Topeka, I have brought changes by being able to work across the aisle. Different laws have passed, knowing that I couldn't carry it, but I had to find somebody else from the other side to do it, to get things done. We need to work together with the commissioners, the UG. We need someone that can bring us together on a whole. We can't continue operating nearman at 65%. We can't continue to raise rates on our people, even though we don't do it, but we have to vote for it. We need to stop the higher escalation of the pilot. There's things we need to work for. We can't do it from year to year. You need someone that thinks 4 or 5 years in advance on how we're going to solve these problems. With that, I believe I have the experience. I've proven it in 13 years in Topeka. I'm ready to stop one adventure and take on a new one. And with your help, I could be elected to District 3. Thank you.
Bob?
Thank you, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here again. First of all, let me talk about the customer service initiatives that we have ongoing. One is workforce development, extension of renewable resources, replace of aging equipment, retire the tenured employees and hire new employees and make sure that we train the employees to take their place. Also, you can go online to pay your bills. We're probably in the process now of upgrading our online services, and you can go with www.bpu.com, find out a lot of the services we have that's available, or you may call the 573-9000 number for other service that you may need to have. In addition to that, as a current board member, I shall continue to provide mature leadership in collaboration with other board members as I've done in the past for over 28 years. Our current board members are involved with several programs and services to increase better communication, transparency, and accountability across the board. My closing statement is very simple. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Please vote No Big Fail, Bob Marlin, and continue going in the right direction for all the right reasons. And I'm glad to hear that my friends here agree that I've been there a long time, and I appreciate it. It's a blessing to serve this community. I do my best to make sure the legacy continues to the best of my ability. Thank you.
Rose?
Thank you, and thank you again to Business West and Kansas City, Kansas Community College for this opportunity tonight. You know, people have asked, I'm a first-time candidate. I've never run for anything in my life. And LaRon, I echo the sentiment.
That's scary.
I'm up against a gentleman who has served in Topeka for 25-plus years. That's scary. I don't know if you guys have looked around up here, but there's nobody else up here that looks like me. I'm a woman. It's worse. This is a male-dominated field. It just is. Utility industry is. But I'm used to being in a male-dominated field. I'm used to being a leader. This is not easy, to get up here and put yourself out as a candidate for public office. Looking back on it, I have to say, was it worth it? Yeah, it's worth it. Because I have an opportunity to earn your vote, to be put in an elected office where you entrust your faith in me to make good decisions for our community, be a good steward of this utility. And with that, I appreciate the opportunity tonight. I need your vote on November 5th. Rose Mulvaney Henry. Thank you.
Let's give all the candidates a hand.